The way this topic is presented originally is an idea that comes from essaywriter.com. But today I got to do something that helped refresh my mind to be able to do this topic. It is some learners maintain that they learn more effectively independently, while others hold that it's better to learn from instructors. Between the two, what is your preference? Today, I was supposed to have been off, but I worked because I was asked to train one of my managers at a job that, because I have been there for so long, of course, I know how to go about it. It basically has to do with how to run the different aspects of the register, but it's pretty much the information that is put into the register and how it's transmitted, pretty much that type of thing. Of course, I don't want to get into too much detail, so that's why I'm gonna be very vague about what kind of job it is. I remember that when I was asked if I would be interested in doing such a thing, I was like, yeah, sure. Even if it messes up one of my days off, there is nothing I enjoy more than training somebody or teaching someone something. But what makes it even more rewarding is when this person that I'm training happens to be eager and interested in learning. From the start, when you have someone like that, at least with me, it makes me want to do an even better job because I know that this person is going to take it seriously, is going to be focused, is going to be present, and they actually care. I'm not saying that I've had bad students in the past personally, but I can say that I have had random instances of me teaching someone something or training someone at something that did not go very well, and it's because the individual I'm trying to instruct doesn't have very well defined what works for them. The very first question I always ask somebody is, what is your learning style? Are you the doer, are you the listener, or are you the watcher? And as soon as you tell me what it is, I will transform the way that I'm transmitting the information to you so that it's suitable for what you just expressed your learning style is. If you're not sure, or if you're a blend, I can adjust to that too. Well, for me personally, to answer the question, I am the kind of person who definitely learns better from an instructor because I will always have a question, even on subjects, things, matters, topics, you name it, where there's not supposed to be any room for doubt, anything unclear, anything like that. I always have a question. If I'm not asking a question, you better be the one asking me a question, because more than likely there is something that I want to ask, but I just don't feel maybe inspired at that moment to ask it. Or maybe it's because if you say that we're going to breeze through something and there is a time constraint of some sort, that already sets me up for a failure in that regard. But I like to have instructors present, and every time I do a training over the computer, and I have to do some survey asking, what was the training like? Was it effective? What do you feel about the delivery method? I always say, I wish I had a live instructor, because even if I'm doing this training multiple times over for years, some of the stuff I'm training on just doesn't ever happen to me. But the day may come in which I could resort to that information that I'm learning in theory, but I haven't put into practice. And sometimes it's hard to identify that instance being an instance from a training I have done, but now it's happening live, and now I'm not able to piece together that this is the actual thing. This is not just the theory drill, this is the thing. And then I thought, oh yeah, sure, I've done this training, but just because I've done the training on paper doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm able to perform this task perfectly, especially if it involves multiple things, or it involves me using a piece of equipment I'm not used to, or anything like that. I always ask ahead and try to imagine what my needs could be depending on certain circumstances. But what enables that on me is my experience, the fact that I have held on to the job for so long. Independent learning for me, it has to be something that is more oriented with my hobbies. The only time I can be self-taught with something is if it's something that I don't need to become a pro at, that it's something that it's just for general advice, maybe some kind of money saving tip, or maybe how to take care of my car better, or things to consider when moving, something like that. I can deal with those things being self-taught by recurring to a video or looking it up on Google, reading an article. That's simple enough. But when it's something that is for the job, something that will affect my job performance, I prefer that live instructor, because a good student is going to have questions. And the best way to ensure that a concept is being absorbed correctly is you gotta be able to ask questions, but the student also needs to be able to ask their own questions. As a trainer, I have my questions that I'll be dropping on the person occasionally. I'll be like, say, if you were to run into this kind of situation, what do you do? By me doing that, I'm kind of examining if what I just explained, this person can describe a method to go about doing something that may be different from what I'm showing them today. Or on other occasions, I like to make the mention of something they may run into so that they can at least have it in the background, even if they don't necessarily know what to do exactly to remedy something. At least I have planted the seed of giving you the heads up that this may not look the way it looks like today, but if it doesn't, here's what you can try, here's what you can consider. Maybe the person who's with you that day, they may not know what to do themselves, but with the little bit that I mentioned and the little bit that you know and the little bit that the other person may know, you will be able to come up with a plan and be able to pull yourself out of a situation. With that said, the kind of trainer that I am, I don't want to impose my technique on other people. I will say, look, I'm going to be saying something a lot, and it's going to sound like, now, what I personally like to do, or my preference, or my recommendation, or to make my life easier, this is what I do. I organize things in this way. I gather my materials in this way, and this is why. You don't have to do it my style. You don't have to follow my order. As long as you comply with what is asked from you, you're going to be fine. How you go about it doesn't really matter. But when you're new to a task, sometimes it is good for you to present somebody with a technique that maybe they can start off with, and then they can change so that it adjusts with their style. And eventually they can figure out the way to become productive at something. Like, I can say, as a cashier, if somebody is slow, I have ideas of what are the things that slows people down. So if somebody comes up to me and goes, Zam, I really would like to be a little faster when I'm at the register, I'll be like, okay, I'll observe you and I'll be able to give you advice based on what I see. For example, some people may be slow at scanning. There is a difference between grabbing the object, scanning it, handing it to your other hand, setting it down, and sticking it in the bag, versus you scan, it flies onto your hand, and then you drop it into the bag, boom, keep going. I can offer that as advice to someone, but just because I'm telling them what I do is I have the object flying up in the air, it doesn't mean that's going to work for everybody, because my physical manipulative abilities are not the same ones that everybody has. After I say that, maybe that person can learn to not grip onto something so much. Like, when I grab objects to scan, I'm usually pinching them. It's very rare that I hold something with a full grip, and the only time I may have a full grip is if something is heavy. But for little ass things, you don't really have to be massaging them so much, bonding with it too deeply. That is a waste of time. And when it comes to your bag, all you gotta do is have your bag just prepped somehow, try to have a picture based on what you see on the belt. You pretty much should see the end of your bag. You don't necessarily have to bag as you go, but if you already see a lot of like items that belong in a bag based on the way you're sorting it, then go ahead and keep building up the bag that you dreamed already of finishing. The way I look at the belt is I'm sight reading, like music. When you're playing music, you're not playing the note that you're reading immediately. You're actually reading ahead, but what you're playing is a few notes behind. That's the way I do stuff at the register. It's whatever I'm scanning is not even what I'm thinking about bagging immediately necessarily. I'm building the picture, and then in the end, it may look like I have a mess and I have ways to go before I can knock the line down, but at least it just goes by really fast because I already had a plan of how I'm going to go about things. But I have observed that some people, for some reason, just don't do that. Like I've said before, some people may be faster by bagging as they go. Some people may be faster by scanning everything first and then bagging everything. Or some people may be just like me. I do some bagging, some scanning. It just depends on how you think and how your own body can move based on what your mind can do. But for me, some stuff is just automatic. I see something, I see someone's cart, and I already know about halfway through how I'm gonna have to compartmentalize it, how I'm gonna have to divide it up to make it more manageable. So anytime I'm training someone, whether it's an admin kind of work or physical kind of work, I'm always telling them your key to success is to organize yourself. Get rid of the clutter, get rid of trash, anything that you're not working with at the moment. Knock it out. Be done with it. For those reasons, I believe that learning from an instructor is better, because when you read something in theory, everything that I just described could be put on paper, but there may be information that's missing. For instance, my pro tips, the way that I'll say things like, how about if you begin counting things in ascending order? Because some people may count cash as you have a $20 bill and then a $100 bill and then 3 ones and then a 5. That gets confusing. Like, try to practice shuffling money around. Take a second to put everything in ascending order or descending order, however it is that benefits you the most. And then however you feel most comfortable adding things up in your head, that's the best way to go about cash handling. But if you try to make sense of what the customer is handing to you in the order they gave it to you, it ain't gonna work out. Most customers do well about handing you the cash in a way that's organized, but some people legit, they be throwing the money on the counter, trying to add things in their head. Whenever they're saying that they're done and they think that the amount they gave me is the amount they intended, I will count again and I will organize everything, make my bills face up, and that way I have a consistent picture on my mind of what I'm anticipating. Because if you have a bill upside down, I feel like it gives a hiccup to my brain. It's like, oh, okay, this picture, I recognize that it's a $20 bill, but when it's upside down and the other ones are facing up, it just doesn't sit well with me. So just take a moment to organize your workspace. In trainings, I promise you, in no training I have ever taken have I ever been advised on technique. There's no mention of organization. There's no mention on how it's recommended that you go about things, especially if you're cash handling, how to go about organizing big amounts of money. A couple of weeks ago, I had a customer pay me with $53 worth of coins. Some quarters, some nickels, some dimes. As the customer kept pouring their change, I started creating my own organization with it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have 3 rows, however many columns of change. And if I ran out of space with my rows, I added another column. And for me, it's like my favorite way to count is by threes, because 3 is not too small a number like 1, but it's not a huge number like, say, 9. And for some reason, for someone who's not very gifted at math, that's just what works for me. I found that little medium to make it easy. Then I had to call my manager over and be like, hey, someone just gave me this fuck ton of change. Do you wish to verify it? Of course, they're going to say yes. So I'm like, okay, to save you the trouble, I have the quarters arranged in this manner. Up until this point, you should see $10. Take it from there. But if you go in there blank, with no ideas, with no coaching, you cannot expect for someone to grasp a concept if you're not invested in them. And another thing that I make sure I do when I'm training someone is I am present there. That may sound very stupid to say, but let me tell you, when I have been trained before or coached before, I have had my trainer take their phone out to read something or send a text. Just made me feel like I'm a burden. If I would ask something, or maybe it's the same question just phrased differently, they would get frustrated with me. And I'm like, if I'm asking the same question modified, is because the way that you presented your concept is at a conflict with my noodle. My noodle needs to do noodle things and take your info, change it all up so that I can understand, so that I can make sure that I understand. But if you ever have an instructor that acts annoyed when you ask them questions, try to get away from them. There should be another person equally qualified to be able to help you out with your training. Please ask for a better instructor. I had to suffer for a long time doing a job that I thought I was too dumb to do because my trainer, let's face it, needed work. And I feel bad saying that, but if you're not going to be there present for your student, for your trainee, just don't do it at all. But at no moment was my concentration taken away from the training I was providing my supervisor today. And on top of that, I get a great sense of pride too that I'm training a person who is my superior. So of course I'm gonna want to do an even better job, because this is a person who is in a position of decision making. And if I don't present something well to them, eventually down the line, it may end up affecting me. For me, that's how it's always been. I have never been good at teaching myself certain things. You guys ever hear me say how I hate working out, how I'm not good at it? All I could use in my life is a coach. All I could use in my life is someone who's eager, passionate, full of desire to come train me and spend as long as I need, be patient with me, be encouraging with me, take kindly to my questions, and even feel a sense of pride that if I'm asking questions, it's because I'm proud and respectful of the role that you're taking as my coach. But for some reason, some people get intimidated and offended by you asking questions. They take it as you are questioning their authority or something like that. And I'm like, for me, the more questions people ask me about what I do, the prouder I am. I think that learning from an instructor will inherently be the superior learning method. But again, it depends on the quality of who's teaching. And you yourself as a student, you have to do your part and become a good student. It's not all the teacher's fault. The things that you can learn independently are the things that you have to define are things that you wish to be independent with. For instance, there's stuff about my personal psychology or emotions or mental state or the way I manage relationships that I would never divulge to anybody else, that I would rather deal with on my own. And I will seek the resources, but nobody would find out that I was out looking for that information. That's different. But even within that department of a topic, I may recur to someone who I may consider adequate to maybe give me a tip on something. Feel free to let me know what you prefer. Do you prefer learning alone or learning from somebody? And let me know why. And if you have an example of something that benefited you learning on your own versus learning from somebody, let me know. But I think that the best time to learn on your own is when you're learning on your own about something that you can kind of call yourself the master of already. For me, every day I try to figure out a way to do my job even more efficiently than I already am. Because by doing that, I am exposing myself to a different method that, even if it doesn't work for me, maybe I will run into someone in the future who may find that weird style better. And if I have already pre explored it, it won't be as shocking to me. And I'll be able to adapt to them better or help them adapt.